So for those of you who don't know me, yes, I am Asian, even though my name may not sound very Asian. I'm adopted, I'm a Korean adoptee, and as part of that experience, I grew up in a very white community. So as a young boy, I oftentimes was asked, do you know martial arts? And as absurd and insanely racist as that is, it was my entry point into action, because I didn't know anything at that point and was like, well, no, but I need to figure out why everyone's asking me this. And as that unfolded, I realized it was because people were watching action movies and there was karate and kung fu. And so as I began to watch and consume content, I realized, oh, there's a lot of Asian people who do this, that's why they're asking. But it was the first time that I was confronted with these images and seeing an Asian person in a position of power, and it was really intoxicating. So I wanted to begin by asking, what was your relationship with action, and what sort of inspired you or got you into the field? And I'd just love to go right down the line here.
For me, it was my dad, for sure. He was a huge movie fan, and he basically was every night in the basement watching Chinese soaps and action. And I don't think I realized it at the time, but I think it was just by osmosis of, all the greats of, Hong Kong cinema and action, that I think I just absorbed it. And then I didn't, as I was sort of going up the TV ladder, I was really into genre stuff, and I liked doing fantasy and sci-fi and that stuff, and it led to a lot of action. And then that's when I started to put it together, that it had come from my dad.
That's so cool. I also grew up watching like a lot of, Bruce Lee was sort of everywhere. And I don't know if anyone's familiar with Bollywood movies, but there's a term called dishoom, which is like literally the sound they make when they're punching each other, because when there's a fight sequence, it's a little bit corny, and we call them like dishoom scenes. And I just got a little obsessed with that, and then, loved watching action movies and would always sort of be in that, and then studied martial arts. So the cool thing about being a director is like eventually every weirdo little thing you did as a kid or in your life comes back to serve you, to be like, oh, I can use this obsession I had in this scene that I get to do now.
My intro to action is through movies. I watched a lot of Hitchcock, Sergio Leone, all those guys, and then I, after college, and actually when I was in college, I discovered John Woo. And it's like, that's where I realized that there's this balletic quality that was really cool about it. But, just in terms of the, Magnificent Seven and all those, I kind of watched all those, and it kind of seeped in that way.
My family comes from a village in India where I'm Gujarati, and we do Garba, which is a dance, a cultural dance. I don't know how to explain it. You dance in circles, doing the same thing over and over, kind of like line dancing in a circle. And I grew up doing that, and it was the core of my existence in a way. It was the most meditative thing. And as I became a writer's assistant, I was working on production rewrites for action movies, and the same part of me was woken by the action, and I saw it as beautiful. And Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon was the defining moment for me, where there was an intersection of just movement and camera and how to trust the movement. And that was it. I ended up working with Jeff Amata, who's out here somewhere, and he's so talented and inspiring, and he is one of my inspirations as well.
Amazing. I'd also love to dig into craft now that we're here at the headquarters. And I'm curious, you get a script, you're reading through it, you realize that there are some centerpieces that involve action, that are going to move story, character, plot forward. Tell me a little bit about that first read and how you start imagining and creating what those sequences are going to look like.
It depends, I think, on the nature of the project, obviously. But like for something like Obi-Wan, where I was doing the whole thing, and no pressure on the rematch of the century. It was a lot to be going into. For that, I will say, like, the process of that was very different from anything I'd worked on, and I think that was sort of ideally, I would always do it that way. But the way we sort of approached that was, it was very much, as these guys were saying, is from a place of character and story. We were looking at it, first of all, like going, okay, they're 10 years older, one's gone to the dark side, what's changed? When we last saw them fight in, Revenge of the Sith, they were fighting a certain way that was very sort of bound to the Jedi code, and they're older and they're gonna fight differently. Ewan hasn't fought in 10 years. So we started at that place, and I was working with an amazing stunt coordinator, Jojo Asubio, whose work we actually saw here as well. And what I did and what I like to do is basically with this, we were doing stunt viz and previs. So for this, we were doing stunt viz, but we took the fight and I beat it out. We beat it out basically the story arc of like, we know this is the beginning, we know this is the end, but what are the twists and turns of these two characters as they go through it? And we basically made a story arc, and then Jojo took it away, came up with stuff, and then we went back and forth with stunt viz, and I watched it immediately. Believe me, I watched it immediately. And it was a big deal. And we probably were working on that for about 4 months before we shot it.
And did you get to play with lightsabers?
Yes, we absolutely
Sorry,
did.
I had to. The 10-year-old in me.
I mean, there were like 50 of them, because there's like the stunt one, anyway, yes.
Mine is a little different because I tend to work in comedy more, and so I love the Coen brothers, and Crouching Tiger was the moment too where I was like, oh, if Ang Lee, who's like this master of storytelling, can also bring in another element, it opened doors. But I think for me, I'm always trying to figure out the comedy beats first, and then the action has to have this special tone, because it can't be over the top unless it's super hard comedy, and it can't be like, oh my God, did that person get hurt? Because then it's not funny. And so there's always sort of an interesting line between that, and I rely heavily on the stunt coordinator to help. I feel like I understand comedy and character in that, and I work and watch the previs, which is such a great technology that I didn't have the first time I had to do a stunt scene. I remember the AD and the coordinator and everybody, they all showed up with these little Hot Wheels, and they were putting them down, and I was kind of like, is this what we're doing? Like, we're all gonna work out this major scene with Hot Wheels? Okay, cool, and I was kind of watching this, and then I was like, oh, actually, this makes total sense. So I think it is according to what scene and the material you have, but for me, I'm always trying to bridge the comedy action genres together.
Is there something about the comedy element to it that you have, like a couple standard tricks up your sleeve, whether it's lensing or perspectives?
Again, it's so driven by the story and the moment and the actors and what they can do. I mean, you made such a beautiful point about some actors you can really push really far and not even, Jamie Lee Curtis is like, I think the best stunt driver that ever, even the woman who was the stunt driver had done the Fast and the Furious, and she was like, yeah, Jamie's a little better than me at this moment. So it was crazy. Like, sometimes you'll find an actor who's just got that thing, and then sometimes you really find an actor who really does not. So the lensing all depends on how to make them look as best as they can.
Karen?
My process is I'll get the script, I'll read the action scene, and I'll start sweating and panicking. It's like, oh my God, how am I gonna do this? And just to be specific, I did an episode of The Boys, season 4, where you guys didn't show the clip that I wanted you to show. It was 7 naked guys who were clones in the same room. But I guess this is the wrong audience for naked guys in a room, right? But anyway, I saw this written out, and I really was panicking. So I arrived on location. My first question is, where is the stunt coordinator? And his name's John Koyama. I'm happy to say that was one of the episodes he won an Emmy for that year. And he kind of talked me off the ledge. We sat down, we talked through the sequence. They like to previs everything, which is fine with me because the visual effects is a very heavy component in the action scenes on The Boys. So it's just fiscally responsible, or else you get fired. So you could pick that, spend all their money, or get fired, whatever. But anyway, so John and I would go through it and beat it out, and he'd come up with a previs, and we go back and figure out how it worked for the characters and the visual effects of it all. But it's okay to panic. It's sometimes the best ideas come from when you're really sweating and you have no time to figure it out.
I feel like I panic through every shoot. I do. On every scene, I do. So I'll tell you, I guess, two different versions. So one with comedy with The Great, I'm working with these words of Tony McNamara, who is I think one of the best writers today. And with that, it was interesting because the action in the comedy, just like Nisha was saying, it's very intricate. You're trying to make sure that every beat is building to a comedic moment, or every beat is a comedic moment. Like it can't just be action too long. And so it's just a beautiful collaboration with the choreographer and the writer in those instances. A lot of times in that particular show, I remember it was like the season finale, and Nick and Elle, we had a rehearsal so we could find the comedy together that was in between the lines, and I thought that was really helpful, so that it was a more, you treat it like a dramatic scene, in my opinion. I think we're all saying that. You treat it like a dramatic scene. You figure out where's the end of the second act of this thing, where is that moment? And that's where the percussion of it goes, and you get there, and then the percussion goes back down, just like any other scene. That's what it should be. Then with, I just did a show called Lanterns, and for that, one of my episodes was wall-to-wall action. And so again, I'm looking for, okay, how do I get to, where's the denouement? Where in each of the scenes, but also in this wall-to-wall action, like how do we make sure it's just not boring, as far as just my end of it. The script is great, but just trying to, how I execute it. In that one, and actually in everything I do when it's that type of action, I look at the choreography, I look at the previs, but then I go and ask the choreographer to show me what he's done in person, and I'm sure a lot of us do this. I bring my DP, and we look at it as if it's a stage play, and we figure out where the moments are, and then with the choreographer, the coordinator, we use his shots when we need to for those moments, but we try to actually make longer takes within it. So it's very specialized in that way every time. And then as far as previses for stuff like Ahsoka, that's a special situation. I should talk about something else. But previs is where I'm like House of the Dragon. I get a VFX previs. I personally prefer to do my own previs. So what I do is I take the VFX previs. I ask for time with the editor. No one wants me to do this, but I do. And we cut it up, and I start writing on it, and we put little, smiley faces, and you know what I mean? And we basically create our own cut, because with VFX, it goes away, and you don't get it for like 3 weeks. And then by the time you get it back, they're like, okay, you got to finish it. I'm like, whoa, I just saw this. And so instead, I just do my own previs that looks like crap, but has all the beats and the things that I want, and then I send it to VFX knowing, okay, it's going to be pretty close to done when I get it.
So you've done the script read, you're talking to your stunt coordinator or second unit director. Tell me a little bit about the mind melding so that they can understand what's happening inside your brain and the moments and the beats that are going to support what you've outlined for the character, for the performance, and how you get yourselves onto that same page.
It's definitely different again per project. Like something like Obi-Wan, with Jojo and I were talking like every single day, 3 million times a day, and I was down there with him, and we had the good fortune that we had actors that were really invested in the training. So we were really, really working together on the whole thing. So that was just sort of, we're all part of it. And also because we were doing the stagecraft technology, we're also trying to do pick points and do crazy ass stuff where we can't use more than 2 cameras, and we're not even supposed to be using the second camera because it's breaking the parallax. So we had a whole nother thing going on with that. Whereas something like Mandalorian, like I had, this episode, the episode 3, which was almost all action. It was like literally 20 minutes of him just killing. The stunt coordinator they were already shooting part of it, but as I was doing it, but we were prevising it. So And we got to the point where we were actually even prevising, and they were able to, have the guys in the motion capture suits so we could sort of do it. But it literally was us at 7 o'clock at night in Marina Del Rey, kind of acting it out ourselves on the floor on mats, going, is it cheesy to have him like shoot the grappling hook and pull the stormtrooper, or is that good? You know what I mean? And then you would try it. So it's just, I think, just working with people.
Nisha?
What was the question?
How do you get that mind meld with your stunt coordinator or second unit director or coordinator?
So it's so different because when you're doing your film, you get to meet with these people and then hire the one. And when you do episodic, you're handed the person who's doing it, and you got to get in their mind, and you have to get on the same page really fast. The one thing I was trying to think of, because you guys showed a clip from Future Man, which was amazing because it was with Seth Rogen's company, and Seth and Evan don't want to use previs and VFX and all that, so it was all real, all the stunts. And the guy who was our coordinator was the guy from A-Team. And so I had this scene where the van blew up and they're walking in the foreground, like in one of those shots, and they were like, okay, we've got one van, so none of the actors can flinch, and it's a oneer, and if they flinch, it's gonna blow the whole thing. And the guy's like, okay, do you want me to stash a camera over there? And I was like, probably good idea, And then it was so amazing because this guy could be like, do you want the top of the van to come flying off? And I was like, well, sure, I never even thought of that. And he's like, do you want it to fly towards that camera or this one? And I was like, wow, he could really get this van, the explosives, to just, like, the top of the van came off, it flew right to the camera we had planted. I think, like, when you have somebody that experienced, my MO is get in their head and learn everything you can from them, and then bring it to the next one. But at this point, like, every single amazing stunt coordinator I've gotten to work with are so experienced. And for me, it's a matter of dialing the performance for comedy, because I think sometimes there's adrenaline and everyone wants to do the most, and most of my notes are, let's bring it down like 10 notches and make it a little more realistic.
I'll give an example, because when you know a stunt coordinator and you've worked with him and you have a familiarity, they know what your skill set is, what my limits are, I know what his skill set is, and it makes things a lot easier. So there's another episode of The Boys, aired like 3 weeks ago, where Homelander and his son get in a big fight. And we didn't find the location till the very last minute, because it was January in Toronto. Anthony did not want to shoot outside. I didn't blame him, because it was like -5. So we finally found a glassed-in building where we could shoot, and it looked like it was outside, but it wasn't. And that way, we had a minor, and he wouldn't be freezing to death. But then, it was getting close to shooting, so what happened was John Koyama came over, and we kind of stood in the space, looked around, and said, okay, what can this be? And we kind of worked it through together. It was like, okay, how about if Homelander goes into this? What could he fall into? And John's like, okay, let's do this. And it was, and of course the DP and the AD and the line producers were all involved too, because, the more we break, the more money it costs. So, and the more wire gags you got, the less time you get for everything else. But we actually went through and beat out the whole sequence, because he didn't have time to do a previs at that point. We had taken too long trying to find this location, but it worked out great. And that's where, in terms of getting, if you're on a show where you don't know the person, a lot of times this process is actually very useful, because you find out very quickly what I know, which is some stuff, and what I don't know, which is a lot. And I'm willing to admit that. I don't really care. So, just having that familiarity with John was so great, because then we just managed to put together this great sequence, and we shot it in the hours that we had, and blah, blah, blah.
For me, it's just been communication. Like, it just feels like it's easy when you have such talented stunt coordinators and choreographers to just say, okay, it looks like we're prepared, like we have something, but for me, what I've learned through the years is to over-communicate, keep getting together, keep talking about it, because when it comes down to it, we do need to be on the same page, and usually we're not, to be honest, only because we're two independent artists. So what I've learned is to actually just make it just as important as anything else, and have the meetings so that when you're shooting, you're not having those conversations, because now everyone's in it together, and this person's not doing it the way that I think is working, and well, why couldn't I have figured that out earlier? It's not fair for me to show up and discover a lot of things that I could have discovered earlier, so that these are people who have been training for weeks and months and whatever. So yeah, I think, and it's been really fun because I feel the same way. I feel like I learned so much. I'm such a fan, a student of movement. I can't do it, just like actors. I love working with actors, but I can't do it. So it's such a privilege to work with these movement artists.
So now you get to set, and we all understand the pressure of the time constraint because there's never ever enough time. You've got your previs. Special effects, stunts take a lot of planning, and there's a lot of specificity to it. Can you talk a little bit, though, about leaving space for that moment that you may not have planned for or that reveals itself, and how do you sort of manage those things during the shooting process?
I think for me, like having done so much TV, and once you do it, you've done a lot of episodic, you have to come in very quickly, and the only way to kind of do it is to be really prepared. So I had already sort of done years of training where what I was trying to do was have a plan and have it planned out as best I could, so that when I got on set, I could sort of give room to the actors to have freedom, so that you can have those happy accidents, or you have some room because you're not trying to figure out how am I shooting this. So for that, I think that's what I try to do as well with the action. Obviously, there's certain stunts and things that are very specific, but I think particularly with the actors, I think the most important thing is not getting it so technical or so in their head that you lose sight of the character and the performance, because if there's no emotion and there's no character or performance, it's not going to matter if it's technically right anyway. It's better if it's sloppy, frankly, but it means something. So I think that's the biggest thing, is trying to, and a lot of times it's also don't note them to death technically. It's actually like give them some space to act here and to be in this. So, is
there a sequence that's sort of the crown jewel for you in your body of work, and why?
I mean, for sure, like it was Ewan and Hayden, and they'd been training for months, and this is, these are actors that worked together 20 years ago. This is like a huge legacy to this, and them coming back, like, this was the sort of thing is when we started shooting it, we came down and the rest of the crew had set up a monitor. They're all sitting on a blanket just watching in silence as we shot it. And like, they were saying, anyway, what we try to do is we blasted Duel of the Fates. I think music is really important. I think it's really helpful, particularly when you're doing lightsabers and keeping the energy up. Anytime we were doing any dark side, we're blasting the John Williams, and I think that everybody gets, you want your blood up, and you get your blood up with it. So I think you're just trying to get energy, you're trying to get it grounded and real and keep the story and performance. And then hopefully the training is there underneath, and you've done your job to make sure that all the technical stuff is there.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is just all the preparation. But I also was told early on, like, not to do too many takes when you're doing a stunt, because people start getting hurt. And so if you've got it, get it, and then move on so that you don't. So I love the technique of breaking it up into little smaller pieces, only getting maximum 2 takes of like a big master of it, where you're trying to follow everyone, and then just working on little pieces in a safer way. Because it's true, like it is, you realize really quickly that it's dangerous, and these guys up here and this amazing woman who made it look incredibly easy, but it's painful, like when somebody has to roll down a hillside over and over. So I think that is always in my head, that I'm not going to get more than 2 takes. So really prepare. And then weirdly, we don't run out of time on stunt days. Stunt days always feel like the most luxurious, because you're taking all the time to make sure nobody's hurt and everything is safe, and then you do your 2 takes and then you're done, and nobody's going to ask you for more because everything was sort of prepared and caught.
And you have the added pleasure of embedding jokes into some of these sequences. What happens when they're not landing, or when you're feeling like that beat's not quite right? tonally, or that the joke isn't fitting into the timing of the action?
Yeah, that's when we rehearse a lot of it, because it does come up with, it is about when you leave after the joke and when you land. And so often we'll just try alts or change the joke or do, I did Brooklyn Nine-Nine, where every actor has their own specific type of comedy that they're really good at. And I did the episode called The 9/8, where there was a huge brawl between two precincts, and that we had 3 hours to shoot like a full-on brawl between, maybe 50 actors. And so it was just like where to plant them so that you could get the yelling. And like, I always find somebody screaming across a room funny. And, I don't know. I think there's just your taste. That's all you can come down to, is like what you find funny, and hopefully everybody else will find it funny too. But how to plant it all so that you can always cut around anything that doesn't land.
Thank you. So Karen, like me, you came up as an AD. Talk to me a little bit about being on set, having devised a plan, having done that for other directors, and do you feel there's a gravy or sort of a sweet spot to the time, and having too much or too little for particular gags or the stunt that you're trying to pull?
Well, I'm the worst person to ask about whether I'm going to get the work and the time allotted, because that skill evaporated when I started directing. It's funny how that works, huh? But, I will say that what Deborah said about preparation, which as an AD, you overthink everything so that on a day, you don't have to think about it. It's common, it's second nature. Director Matthew Penn, when I was starting out, he said, always have a plan and be prepared to break it. And I've lived by that motto ever since, because, you need to know what you need out of the scene. So that way, when the actor refuses to do your blocking and does something else, and you kind of know what you need to get out of the scene to make it work. That goes back to being an AD too, because a lot of knocking on doors, trying to get actors out of their rooms, there's a certain amount of psychological skill involved in that. And that really helped a lot when I was a director. When when I want to get an actor to look towards the lens, he won't do it, and I just started flattering the heck out of him. It's like, oh my God, your eyes are so great. The audience needs to see those eyes. Can you just turn just a little bit to your right? Yes, ma'am, yes, ma'am. And I'm not going to say who it is. But anyway. But, the psychological skills involved in being an AD, which no one talks about, because I think ADing is all about scheduling and yelling on the set, which is only part of the equation. The rest of it is psychology and encouragement. And also, I knew how to run a set. So when I'd walk on a set, I'm this little Asian person. It's like, what's she doing here? And then I start yelling, and it's like, okay, she knows what she's doing. Whether I do or not, it doesn't matter. But, it's just sort of, you just have to project this aura of authority that perhaps is illusory, but, hey.
Thank you. Geeta?
I feel like everyone's said everything that I was thinking. When I'm preparing, I just make sure that I think of my action in single camera terms, because there is this tendency to throw up 3 cameras, 4 cameras, which I've done, but through my time, I think I've started going more single camera in my preparation, because for me, it's created more efficiency, and it's also created a little more calm on my sets for the actors. They're not doing as many takes. I think also, it may not seem like it, but what I've noticed is when there's more than one camera and you're digging for what the second camera or the third camera is going to do, we sometimes end up taking more time it's even 5 minutes setting up that second camera, or you know what I mean, I'm not lit yet and stuff. Little things that I've noticed that have really given us an efficiency when we're like, no, we don't need the second camera. Let's just, I've already boarded this in my head. I've already, thought about it. That's been a fun thing. I think I just did it on Lanterns for the first time. I hadn't done it before, and it just, I loved it. It was, I don't know if it's going to look good or anything. It hasn't come out yet, but it was really fun for me and my team, actually.
Great. All of that's done, you finally get to sit in an edit room with the editor. That process for you, is it something that's musically driven for you? I mean, I'm sure at that point you've got the previs, you've got the script, you've got all these guiding points, but tell me about what your true north is in that process.
I think we obviously had the luxury on the Star Wars stuff that we had those tools. I've also worked on stuff where we didn't have those tools. But having those tools, the editors have obviously seen the previs, they've seen the stunt viz. But I don't think, they're not going literally. And also, you never shoot, at least for us, we never ended up shooting it literally. Part of it, you're dealing with stagecraft, so you can't sort of always do it the way you want to do it. And then there's things that you get that are just like, this is amazing, and we never had this to start with. So the first pass was the editor's pass, and I'm just sort of looking at it in the big picture. And I think a lot of it is just, how does it make me feel? Like, am I with it? Am I really invested in it? I'm trying to watch it as an audience member, and then from there, I just start digging into it, and we start going.
Have you worked under the new contract where you get the ability to get notes back yet? Have you done that yet from the showrunner in edit?
Well, this one, Obi-Wan, actually, there was no showrunner, right? Because I was doing the whole thing, so I guess I was technically the showrunner, so thankfully no. And then Mandalorian was so totally different. John followed absolutely no rules of television at all. So, yeah, it was. But with normal TV, when I've done other shows where with that, I haven't had a chance to do it with a new contract, but that's exciting.
I was just curious. I haven't done it either. Nisha?
I feel like Geeta should answer because she always gets at the end and then everybody said everything. Do you want to go? We should go through this.
I'm just making up shit over here. Wait, so editing.
Yes.
Right? Can't believe you do that to me. Okay, so editing. I'm literally like, I'm going to say that, I'm going to say that, I'm going to say that. So I've had different experiences. Deborah's done a lot more than I have in the Star Wars space. I've only done one, and I feel like it was already laid, it was so strictly laid out, and the volume and the whole, I think just the way they work, the Mandalorian team, it was one experience for me. And then the other experience, the opposite, was probably House of the Dragon, because we get into edit room and we've just got all this footage. It's almost like documentary in a way. Even though I'd storyboarded it and planned it, it was, we just stitched it together the way we were thinking. It was a little bit different, very different actually then. So those are the two sides to it for me. I think working in television, it really a lot of times is, what do you need? What process do you need? Because there's a bigger structure there. There is always a showrunner for me. The writer is always there. And so I do very much, it's not lost on me what my role is at the end of the day, and I try very much to serve it when it comes to the edit. I have my director's cut, but I know also what they're looking for.
Karen?
I have done the 2 extra days of editing after the. I handed my cut, just so you know. This was in the last contract we got this, which is the director hands in their cut after 4 days, and on SVOD shows, within 24 hours, the showrunner or the producer with the authority to cut gives notes. And then the director has an extra 2 days to edit, which is super great, because if you don't get notes, you just have 2 extra days, which if the show's running 60 minutes, when normally network TV is 42, and you're getting an extra 18 minutes for the same amount of cutting time, 4 days, you're basically staying up all night. But it does work. Depends on how much time the showrunner has to give you the notes, but there have been really good actionable notes that I'm able to execute on that. As far as getting in the editing room, the editor, I'll talk to the editor about the action scene. They all get the previs, and then I'm super anal. I go home and I write notes to the editor every night about what I think works and what transitions work and this editing thing, try and use this camera, because I want to get it down on paper before I forget about it. Also, it's my way of, doing a data dump for the day. So the poor editor is a beneficiary of that. But the result being then when I get in the room, a lot of times, they may put it together the way I asked, or they may try something different, which is fine too. But at least we kind of know what direction I was going. And it saves a lot of time.
I like to do, I'm always trying to figure out what the tone is of the scene. And so I purposely don't use music, which the editors don't usually like, but because I find that the music can trick you into thinking something's cooler or better than it is. So I take out all the music and I just watch it and try to make sure all the beats. And then I often, if it's a fight scene, I will go back to the stunt coordinator and have them watch it and tell me if I have any misses in the footage, because I don't want it in there. If I, on set, I'll always say, did you buy that? And if he's like, no, then we go again. And if he says yes, but not from that angle, I make sure I note it down with the script supervisor. And then in edit, we really pay attention to what angles we can use. And then after it's all sort of working, then we'll put in the music to figure out like how it fits in the whole movie. Otherwise, I don't know. I do the same thing when I watch like DP reels. I turn off the music because you could get really tricked by like, oh, this song's so cool, this DP's awesome. And then you're like, wait a minute, what's happening?
So I think we're about to run out of time, but my last question is, do any of you edit as you go, as you're shooting? Do you do assemblies or anything while you're in production?
Yeah.
I mean,
No.
I think the editors are always going usually as soon as you start shooting. It's more, for me, I've found, like, I know some people get really into it. I just don't have the bandwidth, honestly, to get fully into the edit while I'm trying to shoot. So usually I just have the editors flag if something's a problem or something's really bad.
Yeah, I always have an editor being like, you didn't get that. And whatever you think you were doing, it didn't work out. And then you go back and you're like, why? And then they're, it's always great to have an editor that will tell you straight out, you suck and you didn't get that. And then you're like, okay, well, I'll go back and not suck. And then you get there.
And they always know the little intricacies from the showrunner, like what they love and don't love. And
yes.
they've got the inside story.
Go ahead. For House of the Dragon, we had to edit while we shot because we block shot 10 episodes at once. So we were there for 8 months, I think, the first time, or 9 months the second time. And so I would edit in between, and I would always forget stuff. And then I would try to pick it up because we weren't shooting every day. We were shooting, block shooting 10 episodes. You're shooting, sometimes I'm prepping, and then I go back to shooting and prepping and shooting. So it's a bit of a luxury, actually, in that way, is that we could fix our mistakes before anybody knows.
I don't edit when I go along. I have the same system. I have the editor text me or call me and say, hey, can you get that pickup, this close-up or whatever? But I need the distance. I think my shots are so fantastic. Then I get in the editing room like, oh my God, that sucks. And I need the distance so that, the voice of truth will emerge and say, Karen, that really was a bad idea. So now you have to cut your way out of it.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, directors. Really appreciate your time. Thank you, folks.